Welcome to Info Jungle. If you enjoy calm, thoughtful documentaries about the natural world, consider subscribing. We create these videos to help you learn and relax at the same time. Let the journey continue. The surface of the ocean moves with rhythm. Waves rise and fall. Light breaks through the water in rays that shimmer and fade. Everything you see is familiar, measured, knowable, but that familiarity is a kind of blindness. Beneath the visible world is another realm entirely. Not another ocean, but the same ocean transformed. Here, light becomes irrelevant. Temperature stabilizes into something your body would find unbearable within moments. The weight of the water pressing down reaches levels that seem incompatible with life itself, and yet life thrives. For most of human existence, we called this place empty. We drew our maps, marked the edges where we had sailed, and left the middle blank. Empty, unknown, lifeless. Every assumption proved wrong, one discovery at a time, each one more remarkable than the last. The creatures we have found living in these extreme zones challenge what we thought possible about existence. They are not small. Many of them are not small at all. What remains to be found down there in the perpetual darkness? What lineages have persisted through conditions that would seem hostile to any biological system? What sizes have been achieved in an environment where food is scarce and pressure is absolute? These questions pull us downward, into curiosity without easy answers. The descent into the abyss is not a quick journey. It requires patience, the same patience these creatures possess. Moving deeper is moving into strangeness, moving into a world where rules transform, where the basic assumptions about how life works no longer apply in any straightforward way. This is not an exploration of the surface. This is not about coral reefs or dolphins or the creatures humans have grown accustomed to observing. This is about the spaces where human eyes have barely reached, where technology fails, where pressure becomes architecture and darkness becomes the fundamental condition of existence. What follows is a descent, not into panic or drama, but into genuine strangeness, into the reality of what lives in the spaces between continents, in the trenches beneath the trenches, in the absolute bottom of our planet's waters. There is no rush. The abyss does not move quickly. Neither will we. Begin not at the absolute bottom, but at the boundary, the place where sunlight begins to fade. Approximately 200 meters down, the water is still recognizable as an extension of the surface world. You could dive here with equipment. Creatures here resemble those you might see in an aquarium. Fish with scales that catch what little light remains, shapes that fit established categories. Descend further. At 500 meters, something shifts. The blue has become a deeper tone. The creatures here are fewer, their bodies adapted to lower light conditions. Some possess eyes that seem oversized for their heads, pupils dilated to gather what illumination exists. Others have begun to develop bioluminescence, producing their own light from organs positioned along their sides or faces. At 1,000 meters, the transition becomes complete. Visible light ceases to exist. Darkness is no longer partial or temporary. It is total, absolute, the permanent condition. From this point forward, for thousands of meters deeper, the sun has no relevance. Its energy never arrives here. In this zone, something unexpected occurs. The creatures do not simply vanish. They do not become smaller or fewer. Instead, they become larger. This is the beginning of deep-sea gigantism, though the animals here are only moderately oversized compared to their shallow water relatives. But the trend has started. The giant squid makes its home around these depths. The sperm whale descends here to hunt, its body dwarfing the whales humans see more commonly. These boundaries are not rigid. Life bleeds across them. Some animals migrate between zones daily, traveling upward at night to feed where food is more abundant, then sinking back into the dark by day. This migration, called diel vertical migration, represents the largest animal movement on the planet by biomass. Billions of creatures moving in coordination, a synchronized heartbeat of the ocean. The transition zones are crucial to understanding what lives deeper. They are places where specialization begins, where adaptations that make sense only in extreme conditions start to appear. A fish that here seems merely odd becomes, in the depths below, perfectly normal. A size that seems oversized here becomes modest further down. What matters about these transition zones is that they teach us something. They show us that life does not have a boundary past which it stops. Instead, there is a gradient, a continuous shifting from one set of conditions to another, with creatures adapted at each level to the specific pressures, temperatures, and food availability they encounter. At 2,000 meters, the architecture of life changes fundamentally. Creatures here are not variations on familiar forms, they are solutions to a problem that land animals never face. How do you survive in a space where food is rare, pressure is immense, temperature never varies, and light does not exist? The answer, reached through millions of years of evolution, involves size. But not in the way surface creatures achieve size. The largest land animals, elephants, grow large quickly, reach adulthood, and maintain their size through constant feeding. The giants of the abyss follow a different pattern entirely. Growth here is measured in millimeters per year. A creature might add 5 centimeters to its length annually, or less. Over a century this accumulates. Over several centuries an individual can reach dimensions that seem impossible for an animal that moves so slowly, eats so rarely, and lives in an environment seemingly hostile to metabolic activity. The giant isopod, a deep-sea relative of pillbugs, exemplifies this strategy. In shallow waters, isopods remain small, usually less than a centimeter long. Their deep-sea cousins reach the size of a human hand or larger. The difference is not genetic change occurring between shallow and deep populations. The difference is environment. In the deep, size is advantage. It is not burdensome. Why? Consider predation. In shallow water, being small is protective. Small animals hide easily, move quickly, require less food. Predators are abundant, so smallness is survival. In the deep, predators are rare. The density of life is low. Being large actually provides advantage. A larger body can store energy, can search more territory for food, can endure longer between meals. Temperature plays a role as well. The cold here is near constant, just above freezing. In cold, metabolic rates slow. Creatures burn energy far more slowly than warm-bodied animals. What seems like starvation at the surface becomes sustainable routine in the abyss. An animal that eats once a month has moved into a pace of life fundamentally different from surface rhythms. Pressure is another factor entirely. At these depths, pressure reaches hundreds of times greater than at the surface. Soft bodies adapt better than rigid ones. The creatures here have evolved density that matches their environment. They do not fight pressure, they yield to it. Their tissues are structured so that pressure flows through them rather than crushing them. This adaptation allows for flexibility, for growth along different axes than land animals follow. The result is bodies that do not conform to surface expectations. The tube worms that cluster around hydrothermal vents grow upward in straight columns, reaching several meters in height. Their architecture is almost plant-like, though they are animals completely. They do not move once anchored. They simply grow, feeding through symbiotic bacteria that live within their tissues. The giant squid represents size achieved through predation. It grows massive because it hunts large prey in a realm where hunting opportunities are rare, but potentially rewarding. When food is scarce, the animal that can seize large prey has significant advantage. The squid's size allows it to take fish that smaller predators could not manage. Its tentacles, growing to tremendous lengths, can reach farther than any small predator's arms could reach. All of these giants are architects of their own survival. Each one has discovered through evolutionary trial what works in this environment. Each body shape, each size, each adaptation reflects millions of years of natural selection in conditions that do not exist anywhere else on Earth. They are not accidents of nature. They are solutions perfected across geological time. At 3,000 meters, pressure exceeds 300 times what it is at the surface. At 4,000 meters, the weight is 400 times greater. At the deepest trenches, approaching 7 miles down, the pressure surpasses anything that most material can withstand, yet creatures live there. For humans, this pressure is incomprehensible in a practical sense. We cannot feel pressure differences when we are surrounded by fluid. We only experience pressure as a force when it is differential, when one side of us has more weight than another. In the abyss, pressure is equal in all directions. It surrounds completely. It is not felt as a crushing force, but as the fundamental condition of being. Still, pressure affects everything. It changes how molecules behave. It alters the state of matter itself. Water, which we think of as flowing freely, becomes different under extreme pressure. The viscosity changes. The way it transmits sound changes. The way it interacts with biological systems changes. Creatures adapted to these conditions have evolved at the molecular level. Their proteins maintain function in ways that proteins from surface animals could not. If you took the enzymes from a shallow water fish and placed them in the body of a deep-sea creature at its native depth, those enzymes would cease to function. They would crystallize. They would break apart. They were not designed for these conditions. The reverse is also true. Bring a deep-sea creature to the surface and the sudden loss of pressure is often fatal. Their bodies rupture. Their cells fail. They were built for weight. The absence of weight is as lethal to them as presence of excess weight would be to us. This reality reveals something profound about adaptation. It is not simply about structures or behaviors. It is about the fundamental chemistry of life. It is about how far biology can shift while remaining alive. The sperm whale dives into these pressures regularly. Its body must accommodate pressure changes that nothing else in the animal world experiences. When it descends, its lungs collapse. This is not pathology. It is adaptation. The collapsed lungs prevent nitrogen from dissolving into the bloodstream, which would otherwise cause the bends if the whale returned too quickly to the surface. Its skeletal structure is dense, adapted to withstand immense forces. Its cardiovascular system shunts blood away from extremities, concentrating oxygen in the brain and heart. When the whale hunts at depth, it is operating in an environment so extreme that most mammals could not function there for more than seconds. Yet the sperm whale remains for hours. It hunts in the dark. It battles creatures as large as itself. Then it ascends, returns to the surface, breathes, and begins again. Pressure shapes not just bodies but behaviors. Creatures in the abyss move slowly because rapid movement in high-pressure environments requires immense energy expenditure. They wait rather than pursue. They ambush rather than chase. The entire rhythm of life has adjusted to the reality of weight pressing down from above. Some creatures have solved the pressure problem in unexpected ways. Certain fish accumulate lipids instead of using air-filled bladders for buoyancy. Lipid density is similar to water density, so the fish can hover without expending energy to maintain position. This would be impossible with air-filled bladders because air compresses under pressure, changing buoyancy unpredictably. Other creatures have found ways to exist in pressure zones where even oxygen is scarce. Anaerobic bacteria thrive in sediments where pressure is extreme and oxygen has been depleted. They derive energy from chemical reactions that require no oxygen at all. They represent a form of life so fundamentally different from surface biology that it challenges assumptions about what life requires. Pressure is not an obstacle that creatures overcome. It is environment that creatures inhabit. Like temperature or light or food availability, it is one of many parameters that shape what can exist. For the creatures here, pressure is not something to escape. It is something to assume. It is as basic as air is to us. Between 3,000 and 4,000 meters, in the absolute absence of sunlight, a strange phenomenon occurs regularly. Light appears, not from above where no light comes, but from all directions, from the creatures themselves. Bioluminescence is not rare in the abyss, it is common. The majority of animals living at these depths produce their own light through chemical reactions in their tissues. They carry with them the ability to generate illumination in conditions where no natural light has existed for millions of years. The mechanisms vary. Some creatures host symbiotic bacteria that produce light. The bacteria are housed in specialized organs, protected, fed, provided with what they need to survive, and in exchange they generate photons. The host creature receives the benefit of illumination. It is a partnership so complete that separating one from the other would be lethal for both. Other creatures have evolved the chemistry within their own cells. They produce the luminescent compounds directly, controlling when and how the light appears. Some species can create different colors. Blue light, which travels farther through water, is most common. But some creatures produce red light or even infrared, wavelengths that most other animals cannot detect, giving them an invisible advantage. The purposes of bioluminescence vary dramatically. Some creatures use light to hunt. A glowing lure dangles from the head of the anglerfish, attracting curious prey directly into the predator's mouth. Other creatures use light to hide. By producing light on their undersides that matches the faint glow from far above, they become invisible to predators hunting from below. To eyes accustomed to scanning upward for silhouettes, the creature with counter-illumination appears to merge with the background. Some use light to communicate. The lanternfish carry photophores arranged in patterns along their bodies. When populations gather, these patterns flash in coordinated sequences. Scientists have speculated that the patterns serve as identification, allowing individuals to recognize each other in the dark. The abyss, in this interpretation, is filled with silent conversations written in light. Others use light as defense. When threatened, some squid produce clouds of glowing particles that distract or confuse predators. It is bioluminescent ink, a weapon and escape mechanism combined. A flash of light, a cloud of glowing particles, and the squid vanishes while the predator is temporarily blinded or distracted. The energy cost of producing light is significant. In an environment where food is scarce and energy is precious, only adaptations that provide clear advantage are maintained by natural selection. The fact that bioluminescence is so widespread suggests that the advantages outweigh the costs profoundly. Light is not a luxury in the abyss. It is essential. What is remarkable is the sophistication of these systems. Some creatures can adjust the brightness of their light, dimming or brightening depending on conditions. Some can pulse their light, creating rhythms. Some can turn it on and off with precision. Others can change the color of their light output. These are not crude systems, they are refined, controlled, sophisticated in ways that surface biology rarely matches. Consider what this means. In an environment with no sunlight, no stars visible, complete darkness in the normal sense, creatures have developed technology equivalent to our electric lights. They carry flashlights, they carry lanterns, they carry beacons. They communicate in patterns of light across distances that would be invisible to human eyes without instruments. To place a camera in the abyss without its own lights and allow it to film for extended periods is to record an environment alive with illumination. Flashes appear, then vanish. Trails of glowing particles drift past. Sudden glows emerge from creatures partially visible into the camera's darkness. For anyone watching such footage for the first time, the impression is of entering a living night sky. Not empty, but filled with points of light, with constellations, with an entire visual landscape invisible to us without technology. The giants of the abyss possess bioluminescence adapted to their scale. The colossal squid likely has bioluminescent organs distributed across its body. A creature that large, producing light, would be visible at distances that smaller creatures cannot achieve. In the competition for mates or prey, being visible across greater distances might be a significant advantage. What has not yet been determined is whether there are forms of bioluminescence we have not yet discovered. What if some giants produce light in wavelengths or patterns we have not learned to recognize? What if there are creatures lighting the deep in ways that remain invisible even to our instruments? The possibility that technology has not yet revealed all uses of light in the abyss is not speculation. It is acknowledgement of limitation. We have seen only what we have looked for, measured only what we have built instruments to measure. In 1938, a fisherman off the coast of South Africa hauled up a catch that overturned scientific certainty. Among the fish was a creature that should not have existed. Textbooks had declared it extinct for over 60 million years. The scientific consensus was firm. The creature belonged to a group that had vanished when the dinosaurs vanished. Yet there it was, alive, recently dead, its body still fresh. This was the coelacanth, and its rediscovery fundamentally altered how we think about extinction and the deep ocean as a refuge. The coelacanth is not just a fish, it is a window into deep time. Its closest living relatives are not other fish, but tetrapods. The creatures that eventually crawled onto land and became the ancestors of all vertebrates that have walked the earth since. The sperm whale hunts in darkness so complete that the eye becomes almost irrelevant. The whale uses echolocation, producing clicks that bounce off prey, creating a sonic image of the environment. The whale descends deeper than any other mammal, hunts animals as large as itself, battles creatures few humans have ever seen, and returns to the surface to breathe. What makes all these hunters successful is not the energy they expend, but the selectivity they exercise. They hunt only when circumstances are favourable. They pursue only prey that represents significant colour. The coelacanth is almost frozen in form, its body plan resembling fossils from hundreds of millions of years ago. What is remarkable is not just that it survived, but where it survived. It survived in the deep ocean, in an environment that has remained largely unchanged for millions of years, where temperature is constant, pressure is steady, currents are predictable. In such an environment, a creature that is successful does not need to change. Evolution continues, but it works slowly, subtly, without driving dramatic transformation. The discovery of the coelacanth raised an inescapable question. If this fish had survived undetected for tens of millions of years, what else might be living in the deep unknown to science? What other lineages might have persisted in the abyss while their cousins evolved, diversified, and went extinct in shallower waters? The nautilus is another example. It lives in a chambered shell, a design that has endured for more than 500 million years. Cephalopods related to the nautilus, the ammonites, once filled the oceans in stunning diversity. Then they vanished, leaving only their fossils as evidence. The nautilus survived. It drifts in deeper waters still, essentially unchanged from its ancient forms. The frilled shark carries the impression of an archaic predator. Its body is eel-like, its gill structure ruffled, its teeth arranged in hundreds of rows designed for gripping slippery prey. Fossils show similar sharks swimming in ancient seas. The frilled shark has carried that design forward to the present, adapting to the deep but not transforming fundamentally. The Greenland shark is possibly the most striking example. It moves slowly, so slowly that researchers initially thought they were observing dysfunction. But the slowness is adaptation. In the Arctic waters where it lives, at temperatures near freezing, the slow pace is energy conservation, and the benefit is longevity. A Greenland shark alive today may be over 400 years old, born before the American Revolution, spending centuries in silence beneath Arctic ice, hunting slowly, moving deliberately through an environment where patience is paramount. These ancient lineages do not live at the very bottom of the abyss. Many dwell at depths where they are occasional finds, not common enough to study regularly. They represent a continuity of life that stretches backward through time in ways that ground-dwelling creatures rarely achieve. Their bodies are pages in Earth's history, readable by those who know how to interpret them. What is significant about these survivors is what they suggest about the abyss as habitat. The deep ocean does not just harbour life, it preserves it. In a realm where conditions remain stable across millions of years, evolution moves slowly. Creatures that are successful in one age continue successfully in the next. Lineages that would be outcompeted in dynamic shallow water environments persist in the steady deep. If such ancient creatures can survive undetected until recently, if a fish thought extinct for 60 million years can turn out to be alive, then the question of what else might be living in unexplored depths becomes not speculation but expectation. The abyss has proven its capacity to hide giants. The question is only what sizes those giants might achieve, and how many remain undiscovered. In shallow waters, a fish might live a handful of years, reproduce, raise young, grow old rapidly, and die. The pace is rushed because resources are abundant and competition is fierce. In the abyss, time moves differently. A rockfish pulled from deep water was aged at over 140 years. The structure of its bones, like tree rings, revealed its antiquity. A bivalve clam recovered from the ocean floor showed even greater age, over 500 years. These are not exceptional anomalies. They are representatives of a pattern. Creatures in the abyss live longer, sometimes dramatically longer. The reason is straightforward. In cold water, metabolic rate decreases. An animal requires less energy to maintain basic functions. With limited food availability, conserving energy becomes crucial. The result is a slowing of life processes. Growth occurs slowly. Reproduction occurs rarely. Death, when it comes, does so at the end of a span measured in centuries rather than years. What this means psychologically is difficult to grasp. An animal that lives 400 years experiences the world at a fundamentally different timescale than humans do. It is not simply an extension of human lifespan, it is a different perception of time itself. 400 years is longer than all of written human history. It is a duration that encompasses multiple generations of human civilization. A Greenland shark born in the 1600s could still be alive today. It would have lived through the age of exploration, the Industrial Revolution, the development of technology, wars, social transformation, and scientific advancement. Through all of this, it continued its slow life under the ice, completely unaware of the changes occurring on the world above its waters. This longevity changes how we think about survival strategy. A surface creature that dies without reproducing has failed from an evolutionary perspective. Genes have not been passed on, but in the abyss, reproductive effort comes at such cost that an organism might succeed evolutionarily, while reproducing only a handful of times across its entire lifespan. Some creatures appear to go years without eating. They enter a state of reduced activity, slowing their already slow metabolism even further, waiting for the next meal to arrive, a state between living and dormancy, but not quite either. Patience at a level that surface animals have never evolved, because surface animals do not need to wait years between meals. The pace of reproduction reflects this as well. Many deep-sea species produce relatively few offspring. Instead of releasing millions of eggs and letting probability determine how many survive, they produce fewer offspring and invest more resources in each one. The survival rate is higher per individual, even though total numbers are lower. Some creatures migrate to find mates. A fish living in the deep might travel kilometers, expending significant energy to find a potential partner. This would seem wasteful in a resource-rich environment, but in the abyss, where population density is low, such journeys are necessary. The energy cost of traveling is less than the consequence of failing to reproduce at all. All of these adaptations point toward a fundamental truth. Time in the abyss is not like time on land. A year is not a meaningful unit for measuring the life of an abyssal creature. A decade is barely noticeable. Centuries are the appropriate timescale, and across centuries patterns emerge that seem invisible if observed only in years. Consider what this means for giants. A creature that grows only 1 centimeter per year, but lives for 300 years, reaches considerable size. Each year adds a little. Across centuries, those small additions accumulate. A creature 1 centimeter long at birth, growing 1 centimeter per year, after 300 years reaches 3 meters. The math is simple, but the implications are profound. In an environment where time is abundant, size follows naturally. Hunting in the abyss is not a frequent occurrence. A creature might pursue prey only a handful of times per year. The energy cost of active hunting is high, and in an environment where food is scarce, such expenditure must be carefully calculated. A hunt that fails to secure food results in wasted energy. So hunters have evolved to be extraordinarily selective, extraordinarily patient, extraordinarily efficient. The anglerfish uses a lure. The strategy is elegant. Hang motionless in the dark, producing a faint glow from bioluminescent bacteria. Smaller creatures, attracted by the light, approach. As they draw near, they become prey. The anglerfish does not chase. It does not expend energy searching. It simply waits, and waiting is cheaper than pursuing. The giant squid hunts differently. It actively moves through the water, seeking prey. Its arms, extending to tremendous lengths, can capture fish before those fish realize danger is present. The squid uses bioluminescence differently than the anglerfish. Instead of attracting, it illuminates its surroundings just enough to detect prey, then attacks. The strategy depends on speed and coordination of multiple limbs, a feat of predatory sophistication. I see reward. They have evolved to make the most of each encounter. Consider the depth at which hunting occurs. At 4,000 meters, visibility, even with bioluminescence, remains extremely limited. Prey cannot see the hunter until moments before the strike. The hunter has only seconds to react, to adjust, to execute. Yet despite these constraints, successful predation occurs regularly. It occurs because evolution has tuned these hunters to an extreme of precision. The weapons evolution provides are varied. claws that can grip and tear, teeth arranged in specific patterns for maximum damage, tentacles that can move with speed despite high-pressure environments, eyes adapted to detect the faintest traces of movement or light. Each weapon is specialized for the specific type of prey the predator targets. Defensive strategies mirror predatory ones in sophistication. Transparency is common among prey species. Some are nearly invisible, their bodies matching water density, their tissues lacking pigmentation to absorb light. To a predator searching in the dark, these animals are nearly undetectable. Others use camouflage based on bioluminescence, counter-illumination where the prey produces light to match the faint glow from above, renders the animal invisible against that background. From below, the prey appears to vanish into the faint light, becoming indistinguishable from it. Some prey produce defensive bioluminescence, flashing bright lights to startle or confuse predators. Others produce clouds of glowing particles, similar to squid ink but luminescent, creating a temporary distraction while the prey escapes. The arms race between hunter and hunted in the abyss is as sophisticated as anywhere in nature. Both parties are locked in competition that has stretched across millions of years. Every innovation by predators is met by counter-innovation in prey. Every defense is challenged by new predatory strategy. The result is a dynamic system where survival depends on constant optimization. What is remarkable is the energy efficiency of this system. Hunters do not waste resources pursuing prey that will escape. Prey do not waste energy fleeing from threats that are false. Both parties have evolved to be exquisitely calibrated to their environment. Waste occurs rarely. Efficiency is paramount. The giants among hunters are particularly effective. A large predator has advantages. It can swallow larger prey. It can travel farther between meals. It can dominate competition with smaller hunters, but it also requires more food to maintain its size. The energy calculus is complex, but somehow the large predators persist, suggesting that the advantages outweigh the costs. Beneath the sediment of the abyssal plains, in cracks and fissures in the seafloor, water exists superheated by the Earth's internal heat. This water carries dissolved minerals and chemicals. When it erupts from vents in the seafloor, it meets the cold water of the abyss and a dramatic reaction occurs. Minerals precipitate out, forming chimneys and structures that grow over years, building themselves as if constructed by intention. The water in these chimneys can reach temperatures exceeding 400 degrees Celsius. Yet the moment it exits into the surrounding sea, it begins to cool. Around the vent, there is a gradient. Zones of extreme heat, zones of decreasing temperature, zones approaching the ambient cold of the abyss. In this gradient, life has found a foothold. Giant tube worms cluster around the vent openings. Their tubes extend 3 meters or more, their bodies white, their gill plumes red and feathery. These worms do not have mouths, they do not have stomachs. Instead, they host symbiotic bacteria in specialized organs within their bodies. The bacteria use chemosynthesis, converting the energy of the chemicals in the vent water into organic compounds. The worm provides home and access to chemicals. The bacteria provide food. Around the worms, other creatures gather. Clams with thick shells burrow into sediment near the vent. Crabs scuttle across the heated water, somehow tolerating temperatures that would cook other creatures instantly. Mussels cling to the chimneys. Fish dart through the heated water, apparently unbothered by the temperatures that seem incompatible with life. These vent communities are islands of productivity in a desert. The density of life here is far higher than in the surrounding abyssal plains. The reason is energy. The vents provide an alternative to the rain of marine snow from above. The vents provide a direct energy source from the Earth itself. Scientists studying these communities were shocked by their diversity. Species were being discovered that had never been catalogued before, adapted specifically to the vent environment, found nowhere else on Earth. Some of these species were later found at other vents, suggesting a network of connected communities, but many remained localized to single vent sites. The tube worms are the most dramatic residents, but they are not the only giants. Some of the crabs have grown larger than any shallow water relatives. Some of the mussels have achieved sizes suggesting advanced age and stable food supply. The vents do not support unlimited abundance, but they support sufficient abundance to favor the evolution of giants. What is most remarkable is that these communities exist almost entirely independent of the surface world. The vents provide energy. Local organisms have evolved to exploit that energy. Food chains form based on chemosynthesis rather than photosynthesis. It is an entire parallel biosphere, operating according to different rules. The discovery of vent communities in the mid-70s revolutionized biology. Suddenly, the assumption that all life ultimately depends on sunlight became untenable. Here was life thriving in darkness, powered by geology rather than photosynthesis. It suggested that the source of energy is flexible, that life could persist on other worlds using similar energy sources, that Earth's biosphere is far more diverse in its fundamental organization than previously imagined. Cold seeps are another form of chemical energy. Methane and other hydrocarbons seep slowly from the seafloor, nourishing communities of microbes that in turn support larger organisms. The seep communities are different from vent communities, built on slower, more gradual energy release. They persist for centuries or longer, sometimes becoming focal points for specialized ecosystems. Around seeps, methane hydrate forms, a strange crystalline substance that is part ice, part trapped gas. In these zones, tubeworms persist but at lower densities than around hot vents. The pace of life is slower, the energy more limited. Yet life persists, thriving in conditions that seem barely adequate. Both vents and seeps demonstrate that the abyss is not uniformly barren. Pockets of abundance exist. Giants develop in these pockets. The baseline condition is scarcity, but localized abundance supports populations that grow larger and more diverse than the surrounding abyssal plains would allow. Pressure is described as a crushing force, yet it does not crush everything. Some materials resist it. Some organisms have evolved to withstand pressures that would destroy anything built by human engineering without extraordinary precautions. The question becomes not why some things fail under pressure, but why some things do not. What gives certain creatures the resilience to function in conditions that should be lethal? Part of the answer involves density. Many deep-sea creatures are more dense than surface water, but less dense than the water of the abyss at its deepest points. This neutral buoyancy allows them to hover without active swimming, conserving energy. The density itself becomes a form of resistance. Heavy enough to function, not so heavy that sinking becomes inevitable. Another part of the answer involves cellular adaptation. The cells of deep-sea creatures contain compounds that prevent denaturation of proteins under pressure. These compounds, discovered through research into extremophiles, act as molecular braces, holding proteins in functional shapes despite the weight pressing from all sides. Fat content is another factor. Some deep-sea creatures store energy as lipids rather than carbohydrates. Lipids do not compress readily under pressure the way gas-filled structures would. They maintain their volume and function, providing buoyancy and energy storage simultaneously. The skeleton of deep-diving whales illustrates another adaptation. Their ribs can collapse during descent, reducing the volume of air in their lungs. This prevents the formation of nitrogen bubbles in the bloodstream that would cause the bends in surface animals. The whale essentially sacrifices the flotation advantages of air-filled lungs for the safety of not developing nitrogen bubbles. But perhaps most remarkable is simple cellular acceptance. Many abyss organisms do not resist pressure through specialized structures. They simply exist in a state of molecular equilibrium with their environment. The pressure is not experienced as a crushing force because there is no differential, no barrier between inside and outside the organism. Pressure everywhere, therefore pressure nowhere in the sense of being experienced as a force. This represents a fundamental shift in consciousness about adaptation. Evolution does not always work by building barriers and resistances. Sometimes it works by achieving harmony with conditions that seem inhospitable. The creature becomes so perfectly matched to the environment that the environment no longer poses a threat. Yet there are limits. There is a pressure threshold beyond which even these adaptations falter. A depth exists where the concentration of pressure becomes so extreme that even specialized proteins begin to fail. That threshold, for most life, appears to be somewhere around 11,000 meters depth, the deepest known parts of the ocean. At these depths, life becomes sparse. Only the most specialized microorganisms persist. But the fact that organisms persist at all at such depth speaks to the resilience of life itself. Biology is more flexible, more adaptable, more resistant to extremity than the intuition of surface dwellers would suggest. The creatures of the abyss have demonstrated again and again that limits most living things never to approach are simply baselines for them. Sound travels differently in the deep. Water conducts it efficiently, carrying vibrations for distances that would be impossible in air. A call produced by a whale at one edge of an ocean basin can be heard, under the right conditions, at the other edge. Sound creates a network connecting creatures separated by thousands of kilometers. The songs of whales are the most famous acoustic communication in the abyss. Humpback whales produce elaborate melodies, complex sequences that last for hours and are repeated obsessively. Different populations use different songs. When populations mix, they sometimes adopt elements of each other's songs. It is a form of cultural transmission, unique among animals, particularly remarkable in a species otherwise isolated by vast distances. But whale songs are only part of the acoustic landscape. Sperm whales produce clicks and knocks, using sound to navigate and locate prey. The clicks are directional, organized into patterns, possibly conveying information beyond simple echolocation. Some scientists theorize that whales might be communicating information about prey location, or discussing the encounter, or engaging in some form of vocal sparring. Smaller creatures also generate sound. Snapping shrimp produce cracks loud enough to stun prey. Schools of them create cacophonies that resemble the crackle of a forest fire. Some fish produce drumming sounds using specialized muscles against their swim bladders. Others produce clicks or chirps or pulses at various frequencies. The abyss is not solent. It is filled with sound, an acoustic landscape as rich and complex as any forest or reef. For creatures living in this landscape, sound may be more important than sight. While eyes have adapted to detect the faintest glimmers of bioluminescence, ears have adapted to detect subtle variations in vibration patterns. Giants produce sounds that match their size. A large whale's call is more powerful, travels farther, conveys information across greater distances than calls from smaller whales. The acoustic advantage of size translates to reproductive success, to ability to establish territory, to ability to navigate and avoid predators. Some of the mysteries of the abyss are acoustic mysteries. Sounds recorded by hydrophones that cannot be matched to any known species. Patterns that suggest intention and organization beyond what current science can explain. Each new recording adds another layer to the question of what produces these sounds. The famous bloop sound recorded in the 90s was eventually attributed to ice cracking and shifting, but not before it sparked imagination about possible unknown giant creatures. The sound was so loud it could be heard across entire ocean basins. If it was produced by a creature rather than geology, that creature would need to be enormous or produce sound with extraordinary efficiency. These unexplained sounds remind us that the acoustic environment of the deep is not fully understood. It is possible that creatures we have not yet encountered produce sounds we do not yet recognize. It is possible that giants communicate in frequencies or patterns beyond current scientific categorization. The power of sound in the abyss also reveals something about the connectedness of the ecosystem. Giants are not isolated despite their rarity. Through sound, they remain in contact with others of their kind across distances that seem incompatible with connection. The abyss binds its inhabitants through vibrations, through burst waves of pressure propagating through water, through an acoustic network that makes the ocean one interrelated system. In shallow water, evolution occurs rapidly. Generations are short, lifespans are brief, selection pressure is intense. A lineage can transform dramatically across thousands of years. New species can emerge, proliferate, and go extinct within timeframes measurable in human history. In the abyss, evolution operates on different timescales. Generations are separated by decades or centuries. Lifespans extend beyond human history. Selection pressures are different, sometimes gentler because population density is low. The result is that evolution in the deep proceeds slowly. A coelacanth alive today looks almost identical to coelacanths that lived 60 million years ago. The design was so effective that change was not selected for. A nautilus drifting in its shell today uses the same architecture that nautiluses used when dinosaurs roamed the Earth. The innovation occurred hundreds of millions of years ago. Since then, refinement has been minimal because the basic design never stopped working. This stability over time suggests something about the nature of the abyss. It is an environment hostile to rapid change. It is an environment where success in one age provides success in the next age. In such places, evolution works towards stasis, toward finding a design that works and then, essentially, stopping. Continuing to refine but not to revolutionize. But stasis does not mean extinction. Lineages that survived in the deep have proven extraordinarily resilient. They have endured mass extinctions that wiped out the majority of life on the planet. They have endured climate shifts that transformed the surface world repeatedly. They persisted because they were tucked away in an environment that changed far more slowly than the surface did. This raises a question about the giants currently living in the abyss. How old are their lineages? Did they evolve in the deep, or did they retreat there when surface conditions became inhospitable? Did they arrive recently in evolutionary terms, or have they been hunting and breeding in the darkness for millions of years? The evidence suggests a mix. Some lineages are clearly ancient, with fossil records extending back hundreds of millions of years. Others appear to be more recent, having evolved their specializations in the past few million years. The abyss contains both old survivors and new innovations, both the unmodified relics of ancient times and creatures born from recent evolutionary experiments. What connects them is the principle of persistence. Evolution in the abyss is not about dominance or rapid adaptation. It is about finding niches and exploiting them reliably across time. It is about surviving in an environment that does not reward speed or aggression or competition for resources. It rewards patience, efficiency, and the capacity to endure. Consider what this means for the possibility of undiscovered giants. If ancient lineages can survive millions of years without modification, then a giant that evolved successfully in the past might still be alive today, essentially unchanged. A predator that found a niche a million years ago might still be hunting in that niche, because the niche itself has not changed, and the predator remains perfectly adapted to it. This is not speculation without foundation. The coelacanth proves it directly. A creature thought extinct, alive and thriving, apparently unchanged for 60 million years. If one such survivor can exist, why not others? Why not larger ones? Why not giants that found their niche so thoroughly that they never needed to change, never needed to surface, never needed to reveal themselves to human observation? The deepest trenches of the ocean remain largely unvisited. The Mariana Trench, the Tonga Trench, the Kermadec Trench. These are places where humans have spent minutes at most, where the pressure exceeds 1,000 times what we experience on land, where the technology to survive there is fragile, expensive, and rarely deployed. In these trenches, life becomes sparse. The creatures here are primarily microorganisms, small invertebrates specialized to the extreme, but not absent. Life persists even in these conditions, suggesting that the boundaries of what is possible for biology are far broader than surface experience would suggest. But in the less extreme depths, in the trenches above the absolute bottom, in the mid-abyssal plains and the continental margins, there are regions that have never been explored. Entire mountains undersea have never been mapped. Vast plains stretch untouched by human technology. In these spaces, creatures live and die, breed and die, persist and vanish without any human knowledge. What are the odds that such vast unexplored territory harbours creatures unknown to science? The odds are not low, they are high. Every expedition into new territory reveals species that had never been documented before. Some are small, barely worth noting. Others are large, surprising in their size, their form, their adaptation. The discovery of the megamouth shark in 1976 was a shock. A fish longer than a bus, a filter feeder like the whale shark but living in the deep. For all the years before its discovery, it had existed undetected. After its discovery, only a handful of specimens have been caught or sighted. It remains one of the least known large animals on Earth. How many creatures exist in similar states? Known to exist but rarely observed, with most of their biology a mystery. How many creatures exist but remain completely unknown, undiscovered, because they have never been caught, never washed ashore, never appeared before cameras? The question becomes not whether undiscovered giants exist, but what probability we should assign to their existence. Given the vastness of the ocean, the scarcity of exploration, the pattern of discoveries revealing creatures of surprising size, the rational conclusion is that such giants almost certainly exist. What they are, where they live, how large they become, what they hunt, how they reproduce, these remain mysteries. But their existence, while unproven, is far from implausible. It is, in fact, likely. The abyss has proven repeatedly that it can hide giants. It has proven that it can support them. It has proven that they can remain hidden despite being massive, despite occasionally rising into contact with human vessels or nets. The giants we know are themselves surprising. A squid with eyes the size of dinner plates. A shark that lives for centuries. A worm that builds structures meters tall. A jellyfish trailing tentacles dozens of meters long. If these exist, if these represent the known giants of the abyss, then the possibility of even more extreme forms seems reasonable. Perhaps somewhere in the darkness a creature moves that would redefine how we think about size, about adaptation, about the limits of life. Perhaps it has lived for millennia in absolute silence, never surfacing, never approaching human technology, never once being glimpsed. Perhaps it will remain undiscovered for centuries more, persisting in its niche, enduring in its habitat, asking nothing of the surface world it has never touched. And perhaps that is appropriate. Perhaps the abyss should retain some of its mystery. Perhaps the final question should remain unanswered, the deep should retain some of its secrets, and the giants of the darkness should continue their eternal dance in conditions that remain, for us, almost incomprehensible. The descent ends not with resolution, but with acknowledgement. The abyss is real. It is vast. It is full of life. It contains giants, both known and unknown. It will continue to exist, unchanged and distant, long after we stop trying to understand it. We have travelled downward together, moving from zones of relative familiarity into conditions increasingly alien to human experience. What we have found is not emptiness, but abundance. Not silence, but an entire world of activity. Giants moving in darkness, hunting with efficiency, surviving against odds that seem impossible when described from our perspective on land. The abyss has taught us something crucial about the nature of life itself. Life is flexible, it adapts to conditions that our intuition says should be lethal. It finds ways to persist where persistence seems incompatible with biology. It grows to sizes we did not think possible in environments we thought should be barren. The creatures we have discussed, whales, squids, sharks, worms, crustaceans, fish, are not anomalies. They are representatives of an entire ecosystem operating according to principles different from those that govern land. They are proof that nature is far more creative, far more extreme, far more vast in its possibilities than our surface existence usually reveals. If you have found this journey into the deep ocean helpful, if it has helped you think differently about the world, if it has given you a sense of calm while contemplating the alien nature of our own planet, then subscribing to this channel helps us create more explorations like this one. Each video takes time, research, and care to produce. Your support allows that work to continue. The abyss will remain. The creatures will continue their slow, patient lives in darkness and cold and pressure. They will hunt and breed and die in ways we can barely comprehend. They will persist and evolve and adapt, and some of them, perhaps, remain completely unknown to us, waiting in depths we have not yet reached, giants who may never be observed by human eyes. But they are there, in the darkness, in the pressure, in the cold that defies human survival. They are there, living proof that life is not confined to the sunny surfaces we know. Living reminders that our planet contains mysteries that science has barely begun to touch. Thank you for descending with us. Thank you for taking this time to explore what lives below. May you carry with you the knowledge that somewhere beneath your feet, in waters so deep that pressure alone seems incompatible with life, creatures move through darkness, giants who ask nothing of us but that we occasionally remember they exist. The abyss continues.